Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Lacey Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host, and let us not forget, former terrible leader, Lacey Nelson. Benjamin Kintish, welcome to the show. I hopped on as you were talking with Mary, our amazing producer. Listeners are familiar with Mary. And I happened to come in on you just randomly singing. The fact that you were singing in a regular conversation.
Oh, I break into song. Trigger alerts.
Oh,
here.
I was all in.
Listeners, be warned. If that upsets you, you can just skip to the next one. This is like a good... We'll start with breaking into song as trigger warning number 1. 2,
Yes.
my topic matter, death and dying. And 3, musical theater.
Yes.
So all of those upset people in different ways. But if you can tolerate all 3...
And I am here for it.
Yeah, we can talk about how you go from an idea to a musical in 10 years or so.
Yeah. I mean, you have just, I'm sure, really piqued interest already. You are a creator. You are a playwright. You are a music educator. You are a chaplain and a cantor. All of those things exist in you and so much more. So dynamic. I can't wait to dig in and figure out, how did you get to this point in your life right now where your music educator is what you're doing and producing, writing, creating all of the things for a musical.
Yes.
On a heavy subject.
Absolutely.
Okay, first, let's reverse engineer this. Tell us about your project. I want to hear about your musical. I want to know.
I'm delighted for you to ask. So my show is called Life Review, the Hospice Musical. It's a musical comedy inspired by my real life experiences training as a beginner chaplain in hospice care. So a chaplain, in case you don't know, is a religious professional who tends to the spiritual needs of regular people going through difficult life circumstances.
Yeah.
So most famously in pop culture, we know the chaplain in MASH.
Yep.
If you're of a certain older generation, if you're a little younger, you might know chaplains from other movies or in real life in a hospital, visiting grandma or your parents, whatever. And the nice priest, rabbi, imam comes strolling through. That's the chaplain. That was something I did. I was training. When you do chaplaincy training, Lacey, you need a place where you do the hours working with people. So I worked at a residential hospice in central New Jersey. Part of the work is visiting room to room. You sit near the patients. If they're conversational, you have a talk.
Yeah.
If they're quiet, non-conversational, non-verbal, you might bring your guitar, play some music, sing a song, or do a prayer. Just sit there in silence. So I did the full range of things. And sometimes you make music or pray with the plus one, the spouse, the sibling, the adult child. In the course of those visits, I heard beautiful stories, Lacey. And then one evening, I called my wife as I was driving home. I said, honey, I'm hearing these amazing stories. I think they want to be songs. And she said, get writing.
Yeah.
So that night when I got home safely, I got one of those journal books out and I started scribbling down notes for a song that would become the first ballad in the show. It's called Will It Still Snow? I borrowed the title from a poem by my mother-in-law, but the idea is a woman imagining life after her death. She was from New England, so she has positive associations with snow.
Yeah.
Skiing and outdoor stuff.
Yes.
And she's wondering, is life going to go on after hers ends?
Yeah.
So that became the conceit of the song, and it just kind of poured out of me. A few months later, I shared it at a Jewish education conference, and not really a music thing, but a space had been provided, a workshop for people to share songs. It was led by a person who had become a friend and mentor, Sue Horowitz. So I shared my song. It wasn't even fully done, but the basic idea was there. And half the room was crying when it was finished.
Oh, yes.
So Sue came up to me afterwards and said, Ben, I think you've created something of great power.
Yeah.
Is there more material? I said, there is. And she said, well, you need to keep going. She promised me a stage for the following summer. She said, I'll give you a late night. You can share a couple songs. She saw me the following summer. She liked what I had. She said, next summer you get a stage.
Mm.
So at that point, it was pedal to the metal with co-writes. Yep. I joined with a couple of musicians, Mike Miller, Jason Spiewak, secondarily Andy Bossoff and Miriam Cook. Shout out to my music team.
Yes.
So yeah, it takes a village.
Yes.
That's theme number one for big creative project. You need a team. You can't do it by yourself.
Yes.
Also, I was doing real life. This is my first ever project of this size and scope. I had co-written little songs here and there, but they were kind of like one-offs with friend in graduate school, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time I ever had the nerve to really put something big together. And also part of the nerviness along the way, what us Jews say, chutzpah or audacity, as Barack Obama would say.
Yes.
It's to ask others not knowing how they might respond. You know,
Yes.
So if you're asking someone to join your creative team for a project, there's a real chance that they'll say no thanks.
Yes.
They're not likely to pie you or
right, but they can reject you.
punch you in the stomach.
And it can feel like a punch in the stomach.
They can definitely reject you. It can feel like a punch in the stomach, especially if you're like, I don't know, sort of crushing on someone as a collaborator in the way that we sometimes do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, I'm presenting my story of life review as a certain kind of leadership because the idea of a musical set in hospice, like, okay, that's my concept and that's why I call myself creator.
Yep.
But getting it beyond those scribbles in a book could not happen without at least 10 people. The relevant detail for anyone listening, if you're a creator, you got to share your thing with someone beyond your, let's say, smallest family unit.
Right. That second circle.
Yeah. I mean, maybe start with a sibling or a spouse or a loving child if they're still nice to you. I have a 13-year-old, so I wouldn't run anything. All right. So, Lacey, if you have a different show about parenting, you got to have me on. We can talk about it.
Oh, my gosh. We'll compare notes.
Maybe we'll have to start one. Because you know, the internet needs more parenting advice.
Oh, absolutely.
Goodness
Never
gracious.
enough.
But back to what we do need is more hospice musicals. So far, I keep checking on the internet. I'm the only one.
I've not heard of a hospice musical. I was in Tennessee a few years ago at the Bluebird, and I am trying to remember the songwriter, but he wrote one of the pieces that he performed was about cleaning out his parents' house after
they died.
Yeah, after they had passed.
Beautiful.
And
I love it already.
I am not a crier, and I was destroyed.
Yeah, the stuff can be intense.
Yeah.
When I was promised the stage, I got it to 10 songs, and we did a concert version, like a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Andy was at the piano, and he read a narration, which I had written. And that kind of provided forward motion for the audience. But it was performed from books, and we literally had 2 hours of rehearsal.
Oh my God.
So that was only a music rehearsal, and people had to show up knowing their solos. That was the expectation.
Incredible.
And they're all professional musicians, so they did great.
Yep.
Some of them are big names in the small world of Jewish music.
Okay.
6 months later, we did it again with 14 or 15 songs and a full script, lightly staged. This time we had 10 hours of rehearsal over 4 weekends, community theater cast, again with books in hand. So if you folks check out the website after my interview at lifereviewmusical.com, there's a great trailer video.
Yeah, we'll link it.
Fantastic. You can see this video with footage. It was shot right before COVID. That's when the event happened.
Okay.
So it was standing room only, which is unheard of for a new show. Like over 200 people showed up. It was huge. It went off great, beautiful musically. It was one of like the peak moments of my life. Then COVID happened a month and a half later. And so like so many people with a creative project on the up, hit the COVID brick wall, so to speak.
Absolute brick wall. Yep.
I went through some intense emotional stuff. I struggled with all of that disappointment.
Yes.
I worked with a coach actually who had her own COVID heartbreak. She had an off-Broadway contract with the start date of March 1.
Ah,
Maybe it was a start date of April 1, but like a week or two just beyond when everything had closed. So her dream never came true.
the world shut down March 13th. And I remember that day because it's my son's birthday.
Sorry, buddy.
That was not a fun birthday party.
Worst birthday ever. Right.
Right?
So we commiserated about our shared COVID heartbreaks. And then she said, look, Ben, you can do one of two things. Put the project in a drawer or do a hard pivot so that you can perform it this way, facing that little white dot. And she did this gesture,
Yeah.
made some deep eye contact at the dot. And there you go. At a certain point, it becomes Ace Ventura, a little cartoonish, but
It does get a little scary.
yeah, so
Yes.
you gotta be careful. Hashtag keep your distance. But it was an important moment because when you're a creative person and you have a project a certain way, you typically don't want to do a hard pivot, whatever your
No.
medium is. But in that moment, it was like we could not do an ensemble show. I had written it for 8 or 10 people, double or triple cast. I couldn't figure that out during COVID.
Yeah.
And the other choice was like make a movie, which some people were doing. That was clearly high tech and high dollar, neither of which I had.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, okay, so how do you make it fit on the laptop? So basically, I smushed it. I made it into a one-man show.
Mm.
So instead of 16 songs, I smushed it back down to 8 songs.
Okay.
Took the opening number and the closing number and then which 6 in between. And that's how you make a one-man show.
Nice.
So I did that. I actually performed it over a dozen times during the pandemic.
Okay.
The 2 highlights, one was a charity gig co-hosted by a podcast friend. Shout out to Dr. Karen Wyatt. We did a fundraiser for Denver Hospice, also raised some funds for my project. So I was real happy.
Yeah.
And the other one was a former employer where I had done some of my chaplaincy training,
Yep.
Hebrew Home, which is a big elder care facility in the greater Washington area. This is near DC.
Mm-hmm.
They hired me during the pandemic and then they piped me through their internal cable channel.
Mm.
So my face was in hundreds of rooms throughout the facility. So whether you're in the common room or in your bed, you could see my show.
Oh.
Eventually, the world opened up. I played Asheville Fringe Festival, again with the one man, because it fits the Fringe format. You have to be under an hour to do Fringe festivals.
Okay.
I guess the second lesson about the pivot is sometimes when you do a hard pivot, if you don't come up with something altogether new and better, you have something altogether new and different.
I have so many questions.
Go. I've got so many
Okay.
answers.
Thank you. Thank you for taking us through that process.
I broke into song as warned.
I loved it. The first question I have is, what was your motivation, your catalyst? Being a chaplain is heavy emotional work. What made you go, yeah, I think I'd like to step into people's misery with them?
Okay. So first, there's a big picture comment, and then there's like a historical moment.
Okay.
Big picture comment is I've always been a deeply feeling person. I cry at
Mhm.
movies. I cry at books. I sometimes even cry listening to a soundtrack. It's part of my superpower as a performer, as a vocalist,
Mm-hmm.
that I can turn on that emotion and feel it deeply as I sing.
Yes.
And that's part of what makes what I do on stage powerful to the audience.
Yeah.
I have 20 years plus of training and experience as a vocalist, so I'm also quite good technically, but that's not the emotional piece.
Right.
So the emotional thing has always been there, both as a singer, but just kind of as a person.
Yeah.
When I did those career tests coming up, Lacey, I always scored high in the helping and feeling industries.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes basically everything I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the quizzes are right.
Yeah.
So I care deeply about people and I'm not afraid of the tough stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of my biography, the historical moment, early in my career, I was trained as a cantor. That's again a music minister in the Jewish synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
My very first full-time job was let's call it an older community.
Mhm.
It had some young families, but at least half of the congregants were 55 plus, if not 65 plus,
Mm-hmm.
which meant I literally did a funeral a month.
Yeah.
Both for congregants or for the elderly parents of congregants who are in their 60s.
Oh,
You see how the math
yeah.
works?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they need their cantor from the home synagogue to help out.
Yes.
So I did a lot of what we would call bereavement work
Mm-hmm.
related to the official role of being the cantor at the service. So I'm up there and I don't really talk to the congregants, but for greeting them in the room before.
Mm-hmm.
During the service, I sing the sad song in a way and all the people are sad and they cry.
Right.
I'm not uncomfortable with the specter of death or the challenge of being serious.
Yeah.
In terms of working as a chaplain in hospice care, when I interviewed, the rabbi said, who would be my trainer, Rabbi David Glicksman, he said, so you know hospice has a lot of death and dying, right? And I said, I've heard that. And we kind of laughed.
Yeah.
He goes, are you comfortable with dead people? I was like, in a general sense, sure, I don't hang out with them socially.
Right.
And then he said, all right, I think you're funny enough to do hospice.
Yeah.
He said, all joking aside, one of the biggest challenges of working in hospice is people are dying. And so there's a heaviness. He's like, but I think your lightness will serve you well.
Mm-hmm.
That was the particular challenge of hospice work. I took some details of that and included that in the narrative, the fictionalized narrative of our beginner chaplain in the story. He is a beginner chaplain in hospice care. He looks very much like me and sounds like me when he sings. But his name is Rabbi David Goodman.
Okay.
So David, probably as an honor to my trainer, Rabbi David, and also the famous biblical musician.
Mm-hmm.
And Goodman, like so many literati, I made an unsubtle code in his last name. He is a good man. And he wants so badly to help Lacey, but he's struggling with his own grief.
Not unlike yourself, Ben, when you had to pivot. I'm sure there was some grief there as well.
That is an excellent connection. I have had to grieve some dreams deferred at this project. Because when you have a standing room only for your second workshop, you feel like this thing is popping off. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's exciting. And I barely
You
slept
see
that
the
night.
wave cresting.
Exactly.
Yes.
In a certain sense, I don't see a wave again, but I feel a lot of exciting connections happening now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a lot better at sharing the project, and I've been doing this kind of thing, podcasts and other media appearances long enough that I'm quite good at talking about the project in a pithy way.
Yeah.
Which also helps in real life. When there's no microphone, I am friendly, but I do have some pretty intense social anxiety in certain kinds of moments, despite feeling affable on the mic. So I recently went to something called the Baltimore Playwrights Brew. I'm in a suburb of Baltimore City.
Okay.
So it's basically like an open mic for playwriters.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed up with my guitar, and I hadn't even signed up exactly the right way. But I was like, can I sing a couple songs for my show?
Yeah.
And they let me in because there weren't any musicals on the list. And I was well received. And a couple people wanted to talk to me after, including one person from a playhouse.
Okay.
And she mentioned something like, oh, we have our main season booked, but, we do this thing called the Salon series where we feature new works. And I took a deep breath and I looked her in the eye, which is hard for me. And I said, Life Review should be in the Salon series this coming year. How do we make it happen?
Good for you.
And it was a little bit bolder than I'm accustomed to.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I'm trying to do more of.
Yeah.
Because while acknowledging how lovely it is to get any audience at this moment,
right,
I don't want to I don't want to metaphorically be stuck in a purgatory of chaplaincy or hospice conferences.
Right.
I'm proud to say I'm booked for the Illinois State Hospice Conference for spring 2025.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a nice gig. And there might be 1,000 people in a room.
Yeah.
It might lead to another 10 gigs. Who knows? I might be the hottest act in Illinois hospice musical entertainment.
Right,
However, the follow-up question is is that the business that I want to be in?
Yes.
Maybe it depends on how many people want me and how much are they willing to pay? ?
Right. Or maybe that becomes the engine that allows you to take it to a larger, more varied audience.
Maybe. If I can fit paying gigs for conferences that we know have nice budgets for entertainers.
Right.
And therefore I can keep flexing my nervy muscle to charge more, which is another thing we leaders have to learn how to do, right?
1,000,000%.
Ask for what we're worth.
Yes.
Musicians are notoriously bad at asking for money.
Yeah, I know. I was raised in a family of them.
It's tough. It's tough. But there is another thing that for the time being, in addition to being happy about having an audience, the hey, you never know principle is important.
Yeah.
Because while I would be thrilled to have a person with a famous last name, I don't know, a Rockefeller,
right,
listen to your show and then hit me up on Insta Cool. If you want to send me all the way to Broadway with your million, I'll take your millions rather. I'll take your call or however you want to get in touch.
Yeah.
More realistically, it's probably going to be a team of smaller partners.
Mm-hmm.
I think they find me, Lacey, through small appearances.
Yeah.
And I keep connecting and asking and connecting and asking.
I'm all in. I'm sold now. I am invested in this journey. I have not watched the clips on your website. I will be.
Fantastic.
The topic itself is very personal. I'm 45, so I don't think we get this point in life, unfortunately, without experiencing a pretty big personal loss and understand the depth of emotion when someone leaves this plane of existence.
Absolutely.
What an absolute gift to be able to engage people in a way that feels safe. Would you agree with the sentiment that in general, in America, we're really bad at death and talking about death?
I'll give you a qualified yes.
Okay.
I'll answer a different question as I want to do. I would say many adults are very uncomfortable in engaging with their own mortality. I think children are more comfortable engaging with all the difficult topics than we give them credit for.
I agree.
And when we're honest with them, they're easy and ready to go. So I'm just going to skip over that category.
Yeah.
My musical is meant for an adult audience. And the basic question, if I heard it, is this a very difficult topic for us? Yes, it is. I believe it's a popular topic in pop culture. Think superhero movies. In musical theater, think Fun Home, Les Mis, Phantom, Sweeney Todd, Assassins.
Yeah.
So the fact of death and dying, whether on stage or on screen, is not actually taboo.
Right.
I think where people get uncomfortable is looking in the mirror and engaging with their own changing body, their own changing appearance as they age.
Yeah.
Their limitations as their bodies evolve from young person to middle-aged person to older person.
Yeah.
To dying person.
Right.
Those are different stages that we all must walk through. And I'm able to speak about that fluently and with comfort because I'm trained as a chaplain and my specialty is aging and dying. Because I've done elder care for, 500 hours and another 500 hours with hospice. So a lot of time with elders and a lot of people on their way to death. So I'm comfortable talking about it more than most, but for the so-called civilian who doesn't work in this space, it is challenging to say the least. I would say the hopeful thing for me as a creator in this area, Lacey, I do believe there's more interest in it than ever before. This what I believe is partially attributable to the COVID pandemic. More of us in a younger age bracket dealt with death and dying in a way that we hadn't anticipated prior to pandemic.
I agree.
It's a very specific example to you and I since we're nearly the same age.
Yeah.
Are your parents still alive, Lacey?
They are, but I lost my father-in-law a couple of years ago, who is a father to me.
Sorry to hear that. For the living parents, what are they, late 70s or 80s?
They started young. My parents are in their 60s.
Okay, so you have young parents. That's unusual.
Yes.
My parents waited a bit, so they're like late 70s.
My dad's chronically ill.
Okay.
And he's tried to die.
Wow.
Literally 3 times. He's been on life support 11 days and pulled out of it.
Goodness.
And is a pancreatic cancer survivor. Whole journey.
Wow.
Your ilk in the hospital coming through. Familiar. Been at the bedside myself with my own dad more than once.
Oh,
so,
my goodness.
Yes.
I hope if you've had help from chaplains, they've been helpful. If not, I apologize.
Yes. They were beautiful souls that gave us a lot of comfort.
Generally, the chaplains I've met have been quite wonderful, patient.
Yeah.
Sort of the best, most loving clergy there are.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of the opposite. You have to subsume your ego. That's one of the lessons of the hero in the musical. In the beginning of the play, he kind of stumbles when he tries to, I'm going to use the word pontificate, though it's funny for a young rabbi to do so. But he was basically sermonizing for a mother whose 20-year-old son was dying of cancer. And he mentioned Job in a way that was glib and unfunny, talking about the fact that, Job's children died and he was a good man. And she was horrified.
Right.
It's written as an intentionally horrible scene.
Right. I'm cringing right now.
Yeah, exactly. That is the desired effect. This is co-written by co-writer Beth Broadway.
Nailed it.
And so the woman casts him out, and this is actually his low moment professionally. And he looks to the heavens. He sings his I Wish song, which is Send Me a Sign. And he's asking for divine intervention because he's feeling so lost. So it's a very specific professional moment, a chaplain who picks the wrong thing to quote. But the meta lesson is like your job when people are in distress, your job is not to teach or preach. Your job is to sit in the silence. If you have permission, hold hands.
Powerful. I'm getting chills.
Yeah. And that's something that Rabbi David learns, and then asking some questions to invite stories. And then in the heart of the play, we hear the stories that become songs, kind of like chorus line. And then towards the end of the play, of course, we have to say goodbye to some of our friends, as happens. But we end on a hopeful note, I promise. So that's Life Review in a hot minute. You have a funny podcast named
Confessions of a Terrible Leader. Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the ways I've stumbled terribly?
That's exactly where I was going next. So perfect timing.
Because there's a lot. I'm ready to spill the tea and maybe even cry a little.
Spill the tea. I want all the juicy details. And I'm going to be making connections to all this context we just learned about you. And I'm sure we're going to see reflections of your learnings in your creation. It has to be there. So just start talking. I'm here to listen.
My big idea here is that as leader, the creator, the hands on the wheel of the ship.
Yes.
The idea began, and the very first challenging moment was when I first began co-writing. So the first part of it was I had a lot of nervousness about even doing the ask because this was a guy I perceived as, quote, a cool dad at the JCC. So above average in looks and job status, an actual professional studio level musician in New York City. He owns a record label.
Oh my gosh.
Super cool dude.
Yeah. Collaborative crush. Big time.
Exactly. And I didn't think, because who the fuck am I? Pardon my French.
You're fine. You can swear.
This cancer knows how to curse. When I told Jason about the project, and he was like, it sounds interesting. Why don't you come over? We'll have a drink. I'll pour some nice brown, and you can tell me more about the project. Went to his house, and I was super nervous. I'd never hung out with him socially. So, I was already like, oh, I'm hanging out with the cool guy.
You're going to the cool kids' lunch table.
Exactly. Except it was like high stakes.
Right.
Because if this real guy joined my project, it's sort of... I wasn't asking him to win his creds, but when I discovered his bio, I was like, the fraud complex was off the charts.
Yeah.
Good news. He was very lovely, remains a very chill dude. We had a drink. I told him about the project. He said he thought it was funny and brilliant. We had a little debate. I said, I think it's a musical. He's like, let's start with a concept album because that's only 5 songs. He's like, a musical is going to be at least 10 or 12 songs, and that's going to take a lot longer. So he was right and I was right. He was right in that having a smaller project to tackle was a good strategy for new collaboration. I was right that we were going to get to a musical. Sometimes you can both be right, even as you disagree.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened is we laughed and we kind of had the spirit of improv people, like any idea is a good idea. I had my pen going fast and he had one joke that ended up building the opening song, which is hilarious, which is spoiler alert, everybody's going to be dead at the end. And then I rewrote it to everybody dies in the end because that sings better. And it's hilarious. And that's the opening number. It's vaudeville and it breaks the ice. So the very first big moment as leader was going into a collaboration in a way that was open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
So the opening meeting went well.
Yeah.
The first co-write session was moderately successful. And then I brought a lyric. It might have been bringing a lyric to our first co-write in person. He had done one that was like pen pal style, right? Just emailed the lyric and he did it and it worked. But I brought one to him and I thought it was good. It was not good. And he looked at it. It was meant to be sort of a funny dance number. And basically the central punchline was unfunny and it was built on a pun based on a term that is no longer in use. Not funny and anachronistic, doubly unworkable.
Audience will have no idea. Yeah.
And I was like, it's clever and I'm going to repeat the punchline 100 times.
Yeah.
And he just held it up and he's like, Ben, this isn't it. And I was visibly crestfallen. And he goes, hold on a second, Ben, take a deep breath and then you need to pick your head up. Because you and I have something, it's called a creative relationship and you have to trust me. Because if I tell you that something that is not good is good, then my word is useless. And we will not put out good work. He's like, the last lyric you gave me was excellent, and I told you that because it was excellent.
Yes.
If it was not excellent and I told you it was excellent, I would be full of shit and you would not want to work with me.
Trust would be broken. Yep.
It's like, so either if I'm too soft or too hard, I will break trust. I will not do that.
Right.
But you need to trust that not every lyric you bring me is going to be your strongest, and that's okay.
Yes.
Do you have anything else in that book? And he flipped through, and I tried to say something like, oh, that's not. And he's like, shut up. And he just looked for the text because he knew that what he was looking for was a lyric.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, this is good. I can work with this.
Yeah.
And that became one of the stronger songs in the show. It's called Live Until You Die. And it's an anthem inspired by the words of Cicely Saunders, the founder of the modern hospice movement. Those words can be seen in needlepoint or poster form on the wall of like every hospice in the world. And I tweak the words a little so they are mine, but I attribute it to her partially.
Yeah.
It's a song that celebrates living in the moment and caring for people, even while acknowledging that they are dying.
Yeah.
I will walk with you while you're on your way. I will talk with you so you have your say. Be here by your side till the final day. I'm here with you. Live until you die.
And if you had not have gotten that candid feedback and redirect from your co-collaborator, that song wouldn't have been born, at least not as it is now.
Yeah. And with love to every other creator out there, I have seen great songs performed in settings where people share material, and I've seen some real clunkers.
Mm-hmm.
God bless you for having the bravery to present a song, good, bad, or otherwise.
Yes.
On a community stage when given the chance.
Yes.
I will clap for you and I will not be mean.
Yeah.
I will say on the drive home to my wife, wow, that song about driving a car. Oof.
It's not exactly fast car.
No. And it was so bad, Lacey, that we sometimes reference it. It's amazing how train wrecks, so to speak, creatively can sometimes be memorable.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really remember middling movies. They remember great ones and terrible ones.
So true.
Same thing with songs.
Outfits.
Yeah. People who are musical theater dorks, they all have their favorite show that was a commercial flop, but should have been a hit.
Yeah. So would you say your biggest learning and takeaway from that, bringing the lyric that wasn't ready, you thought it was great, but being open and hearing this isn't it, what did you take away from that experience primarily?
It's to be a creative collaborator, you have to be ready to accept that not all of your ideas are going to be loved by the other people or even liked.
Yes.
You need to get your pen or pencil moving.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the business of sharing ideas, not every idea you have is going to be a winner.
Right. And you see it in business too. You see creative entrepreneurs looking at how many swings at bat and terrible products Microsoft has made. Completely could not compete in the market and just got devoured by software that did it better, faster, whatever, had a better user interface. It's a totally different kind of creativity, still innovation. Any creative process. Yes, you can have one really big success or two, but it doesn't mean the rest are going to be great. We all make stuff that sucks.
Yes.
Or that just isn't it.
In the case of that story, there was the piece of having to let go the ego.
Yeah.
But I've since learned that there's actually a thing to the craft that you have to put in the studio time. During college, I dated an art girl. She spent a lot of time in the studio. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Part of the reason there's that expectation is because they want to build the muscle of work.
Yes.
Because in the real life, the only way you can possibly succeed at creativity is if you are actually creating.
Right.
The collaboration with Jason, maybe I implied it. I should say he's generally a good dude. And because he's worked in the business a long time, he knows how to navigate around artists with fragile egos.
One of my very best mentors, the very first time I wrote something for her that was essentially like a white paper sort of thought leadership type thing, she looked at it, read it, looked at me. She's from New York. We were on the West Coast. She goes, this is shit.
Oh,
Hands it back to me.
it's not good.
It was rough, but I had to choose to either learn from her or get crushed. I chose it as a learning opportunity and was able to say, tell me more,
Ooh.
and not just run back to my office and cry. I wanted
Save the
to.
crying for later.
And then she ended up becoming one of my best mentors in the early parts of my career.
Yes.
What I'm hearing from you in this is that you got to put in the work and do the time. Creativity requires repetitions.
Yes.
And you're going to have the good, the bad, and the ugly is going to come out of that.
Yep.
Having the chutzpah
Yes.
to be able to put yourself out there and
Gotta
be
share it.
vulnerable,
Yep.
you have to share it because it can't exist in the closet.
It can, but you guarantee the size of the audience when you keep it in the closet.
Yes.
We all have our private dream.
Yes.
But when we have the nerve to take it out of the drawer and share it, give it some sunshine,
Yes.
shine a light on it, it might just grow.
Yes. You can be extremely self-limiting by refusing to share. And I will say selfish because someone probably needs what you have. So get over yourself and put it out there.
Yeah, I love that.
Easier said than done.
My day job, Lacey, I'm an elementary school music teacher. So I have approximately 150 kids. There's a lot of reassuring when you're the music teacher. It's like, you can sing.
Yes.
You can dance.
Yes.
You can play a xylophone. Just try. The whole curriculum is built on exploration and experimentation.
Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of adults are far less open to that.
Yes.
To me, it's been maybe the biggest challenge for me personally in terms of leadership. One of the reasons I was drawn to your hook, the name of your podcast,
Mhm.
I feel depending on the day, sometimes I'm a rather successful creative leader because look, I've
Yeah.
made it 10 years and I'm still going. On the other hand, I've had some real setbacks. There was an attempt to stage an outdoor show, let's say late in COVID, when the world was just starting to do things like outdoor shows. The wheels came off in a pretty dramatic way that broke my heart and the show never happened. But I learned in that moment, being lead producer is probably not for me. I need at least a small team.
Yes.
Especially if I'm going to be on stage.
Yeah, building the team. That's the other thing that I heard is you put it out there, you take it out of the drawer, you show people,
Yeah.
and then you start saying, will you come help me?
Yeah, who can help?
Will you come be part of this? The invitation. And then you start building out that team. And that also requires, as you shared, a high level of chutzpah and vulnerability to really be willing to get rejected.
That's right.
And you will get some no's.
Yeah.
You will have some collaborative crushes say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Or not right now. You have to say, I'm going to put my ego down enough to be able to do this, knowing I might get a little bruised and it's still going to be worth it because the ultimate outcome is there's more value in that. There's so much there that I can't not try because if I don't try, I'm not going to be okay with it. That's how I always know if it's a good idea for me to go forward or not with an idea is, am I going to be able to be okay if I see someone else out there do it first or instead of me? And am I going to be okay and able to look back and say, I'm okay that I didn't try to do this? And if I can't honestly answer those questions in a way that allows me to release it, I know that it's not an idea I can let go of yet.
I hear all that, Lacey. Well said, for sure. It's a big piece of being a creative person. It's the vulnerability. And part of what you're being vulnerable to is this thing called rejection, which happens a lot in the world of performance.
Yep.
A lot of times you're sharing about your event or your appearance, and you're doing this kind of mental calculus about how many people can you reach out to and convince to come. And some people are going to be excited and a lot of people are going to ignore you. And it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's kind of a numbers game.
Right.
So that becomes a different sort of skill set, doing the promotions, the social media, the appearances.
Yep.
It is difficult for me to stay on top of all manner of professional things, especially with complex project management is not my number one skill. But this is exactly...
Mine either. I have a team.
Well, this is exactly what a musical is, though.
Yes.
That I've described working with 5 or 6 creatives.
So many moving pieces.
Right now, I'm getting ready for 5 appearances, one of which is a one night only, and the other 4 are part of a festival. But it's essentially 5 shows. Luckily, one pianist has been hired for all 5, so that's simplified. The show provides sound, but not a tech. At the festival, we have sound gear in-house for the one night only, but not a tech. Clearly, I need to sit down and figure out what needs to be done.
Yes.
I may attempt again to get someone like a local college kid, a theater major, to be a social media assistant or something. And I bet you they would do awesome.
Right.
Something I was joking about with your producer before we got going. The thing that I do the best is the thing that's actually the hardest to do, which is write a musical that entertains and moves people. I did that.
Yeah.
I can make people cry with the power of my words. So that's a superpower.
Yes.
And I can sing it at a professional level, which is also no small potatoes.
Also a superpower.
Maybe superpower, maybe a superpower adjacent, but it's something.
It's a skill. It is a high level skill.
It's a high level skill, to be fair.
Yes.
That said, though, producing project management, it is actually something that others do far better than me. So I look forward to the day when I can bring on some people to help me.
Yes. So all this to take it home, if you could say listeners that are creatives, whether they're creative in the same way you are, or they're creative in their entrepreneurially creative.
Yes.
Anyone who has that creative bent, if you could say, hey, just take this one gem with you, what would it be?
Get yourself an appealing journal book and a pen or pencil and make sure it's with you all the time. When you have good ideas, get in the habit of writing them down.
Yes.
Yes, there's the tech version. You can also do a tech analog with your voice memo. But I personally think that a journal book is a better place as a compendium for ideas. It's inviting and you can find your things and scribble further, doodle further.
Yes.
Related to that is let the pen or pencil move across the page at speed. Take that editing voice, tell it to shut up, and just go.
Yep.
Stream of consciousness style.
Yeah.
I promise you can edit later.
Yeah.
This goes for lyricists or playwrights, story writers, and it also goes for people who are writing a business plan or grant proposal.
Yeah, you cannot edit a blank page.
Exactly. So fill that page.
Yes.
I generally recommend giving it a day or two before you try to edit.
Let it sit.
Then come back.
Yep.
That's going to help you get your ideas out on the page.
I love it. Ben, thank you so much. This has been a fun conversation.
Oh, I've enjoyed it so much, Lacey.
First playwright we've interviewed, so that's exciting.
Fantastic.
I really enjoy the creativity just bubbles out of you and the passion for your work and your project. I'm ready to go pitch it to our local theater. Thank you. Where can people find you?
There's a great website, lifereviewmusical.com. I'm active on Instagram at lifereviewmusical, where I post regularly and you can DM me there. Those are two good ways to be in touch.
And we will drop all of your links in our show notes. And Ben, thank you so much. Listeners, until next time, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If one-to-one coaching, engaging workshops, or strategic planning that is actually useful are anything that interests you, make sure to head over to transcendleadershipcollective.com to check out our free resources. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Lacey Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a review. And until next time, go manage like a leader.